This is CBC Nova Scotia News.
Tonight, eviction notices. Halifax orders people living in 5 tent encampments to pack up and leave.
Snowed in, hundreds in Pictou County remain stuck in their homes.
And SPCA evacuation. Staff removed dozens of animals from the Sydney shelter amid fears of a roof collapse.
Mainly cloudy tonight and to start Thursday, but brightening the skies into the afternoon as this area of high pressure sets up. Your full forecast is coming up.
Good evening. People living in 5 tent encampment sites in Halifax have received eviction notices. They're being ordered to leave in the coming weeks. The municipality is warning they could be fined or even arrested if they don't comply.
The 5 designated sites are closing because the municipality says that there are now better options available for the people living in tents. The CBC's Paul Palmeter has that story.
Notices were posted early this morning. They state failure to vacate the properties is an offense for which any person can be arrested by a peace officer and removed from the property. It came with a deadline of February 26, but not everyone plans to comply.
I'm not leaving. No, I'm not leaving. And I'm telling everybody else not to leave either. They can come do what they did there at the old library if they want to, and see how far that goes globally. See what they look like after that.
Service providers have identified indoor sheltering and supportive housing options, and the mayor says city staff will be working with residents of the encampments to move indoors.
We should never accept it as normal that people spend winter in tents in our community. We should all share the objective to get people inside and connected to supports that will better serve them in the short and the long term.
The notices caught many off guard, including the volunteers helping those living at the sites.
We arrived here this morning with an eviction notice on our tents. I was in a state of shock to see this type of notice in the middle of winter. It's a sad day. It's a state of emergency for the unhoused, as far as I'm concerned.
Nova Scotia's Deputy Housing Minister said today tiny homes will not be ready by the end of February. These 19 pallet shelters that are being built in Lower Sackville are being constructed quickly, but they may not be ready in time either. The NDP says evictions should only happen when people have a safe, permanent place to live. Mayor Savage says he doesn't want to see anyone have to be forcefully removed from the encampments, which is what happened 2.5 years ago when police did have to get involved at the old Halifax Library. The mayor says they will try to move people out without using physical force. It's been a frustrating file for the city to navigate with their federal and provincial counterparts.
Is the province doing enough? Look, I've said many times, nobody's done enough. We didn't have a federal housing plan in this country from the early 90s till 2018. We had no significant purpose-built affordable housing in this province for decades. So no, nobody's done enough.
The homeless that are living at these sites now have less than 3 weeks to figure out where they'll be going next, whether that be to a shelter or elsewhere. But this option is coming to an end. Paul Palmeter, CBC News, Halifax.
Paul McKinnon is with the Downtown Halifax Business Commission, which manages the street navigators who help homeless people get off the streets. He says he agrees with the many people who believe now is the time to move the tenters, and he's hopeful the city won't see the kind of protests that happened in 2021 when the city removed tents and temporary shelters on Spring Garden Road.
Yeah, it certainly is a concern, and I think obviously if you've been on social media, people are kind of rallying around that cause again. And but I think what a lot of people, the situation in front of Grafton Park a number of years ago, it just was really poorly handled by lots of folks, and no one wants to see a repeat of that.
I'll talk to Paul McKinnon of the Business Commission about the deadline set to remove the tenters in our Newsmaker interview just after 6:30. To Pictou County now, where hundreds of people are still stuck inside their homes after the historic multi-day snowstorm. Rural roads in the area have yet to be plowed. The municipality is now considering declaring a state of emergency. The CBC's Nicholas Sagan reports.
In Pictou County, the storm may have passed, but the ordeal is far from over. The snow is wet and heavy, and 6-foot-high drifts are still covering many roads. Even as plows work around the clock, hundreds of people are still trapped in their homes.
Well, you're sitting and you're by yourself and you're waiting for, and I get a phone call, I'm not coming today, I'm not coming today. And there I am, I'm saying I don't even see another soul. It's frightening.
Bruton was stuck in her home for 5 days alone. The roads all around her home impassable. Then her continuing care assistant thought of her own way to get in.
And when I knew that Nellie was here alone and had no access to anyone, I packed up a couple of dinners and I got on my skidoo and I drove it over to her.
People are taking matters into their own hands, clearing snow and helping neighbors in any way they can. But McLeod says she's worried for vulnerable people who are still snowed in with no one to turn to.
And they're diabetics. And I mean, no one's getting out to help them. It could be a sad end to somebody's life, unfortunately, because the roads aren't cleared for us to get out.
The warden of the municipality shares the same concerns, and he's pleading for more resources.
People don't realize how hard this Pictou County was hit. So it's more equipment that we need. They say they're bringing in more equipment, the province is, from New Brunswick and other places. The sooner it gets here, the better.
The Department of Public Works says it has 51 vehicles on the roads in Pictou County. Around 29 roads are still unplowed, but they're starting to make some headway.
By the end of today, we should have put a dent in our list. And probably by Friday evening, we're hopeful in Pictou County to have a passageway through a lot of our roads.
In the meantime, the province says it will send snowmobiles into the blocked roads to bring in much-needed supplies. And for people stuck in their homes, that can't come soon enough. Nicola Sagan, CBC News, Pictou County.
The record snowfall in Cape Breton has caused an emergency at the SPCA in Sydney. There's so much snow on the roof, there are fears it will collapse. As Gareth Hampshire tells us, they are now moving to get the animals out.
You can see behind me the snow is as high as the top of the ceiling here at the SPCA building, and the weight is the big concern. Staff have been sleeping inside here actually overnight since the storm on Friday, taking care of the animals. They've been hearing creaking. The beams have been bowed, and the big concern is the weight could actually cause the roof to collapse.
We are evacuating due to safety, 45 animals, and we are closing the shelter and the veterinary hospital while we get a structural engineer in to look at what damage this storm did to the shelter.
There are 45 animals inside the building, and they're being moved out from the highest area of concern underneath the biggest amount of snow. There are 19 dogs, 25 cats, and 1 rabbit. Staff from the Dartmouth SPCA building have now arrived here, and they are beginning to take the animals out of the building, and they'll be going to different shelters around the region. And in the meantime, a contractor has been sourced to try to get a crew together to remove the snow and ice from this building and try to make it safe. Gareth Hampshire, CBC News, Sydney.
Meanwhile, cleanup efforts continue throughout Cape Breton. Today, officer cadets from the Canadian Coast Guard College were called in to help shovel the record-breaking amount of snow from the streets. Cape Breton Regional Municipality remains under a local state of emergency. Schools and public offices also remain closed. But progress is being made. The Provincial Public Works Department says major highways across the island are now passable. However, dropping temperatures are now making the snow harder for residents to move. Kevin Ford and his crew, who've been cleaning off roofs, found that out the hard way.
It's like concrete today. Like yesterday wasn't so bad, but the more moisture in the air, she's packing harder and harder. It's cooler today, so it's like rocks up there. I snapped it. I'm gonna have to go get the metal one. It'll work. Not doing too well. It was great yesterday, but not today. No, not so much.
Ford says they've got about 15 roofs they'll be working on in the coming days.
Well, at least the weather's been good enough for them to start to get some of that work done.
But some heavy lifting, as we saw.
Heavy lifting, not going to get any lighter, that is for sure. The weather is quiet, but of course, this time of year, right? The temperature goes up in the day, snow starts to melt a little bit, then we drop below freezing at night, and things freeze up again. And tonight is going to be one of those nights where things are really going to freeze up. As you can see, we're already dropping into the -3 range across Cape Breton. -2 to -3 in through Pictou and Antigonish counties, and -3 already in Halifax. Most of us tonight are going to be dropping into the -6 to -8 range. We'll dip into -10 range even in through the north and east. But yeah, so a cold night tonight and a freeze up. The good news is, for sure, the winds have continued to back off from where they were a couple of days ago, and they're going to get even lighter as we turn the page into tomorrow. As you can see, there's that area of high pressure that's moving into the area, helping to keep this storm system offshore. We are going to be watching this guy right here, this storm system rolling through the U.S. Prairies and the plains right now. That is going to be working its way in for the weekend, but it's not going to be a big weather maker for us, thankfully. Tomorrow, temperatures will range from 0 or at least -1 in through the Sydney area to as warm as 2 along the Atlantic coastline. So right around the freezing mark. A lot of sunshine tomorrow, which is going to be nice for folks out snow clearing, and those winds will be even lighter than they were today. Northeast winds 5 to 10, gusting 15 to 20 at the very most. So a nice quiet day for tomorrow. And that area of high pressure is going to continue to dominate even into Friday, keeping things quiet. And then there's that weather maker that we just talked about, and it will roll in for the weekend, but only a few flurries mixed to a few showers on Saturday. Better chance of a shower on Sunday. Not a huge warm up, no double digits, just low to mid single digit temperatures. Not till early next week, Tom and Amy, that we have something to keep an eye on. We'll break that down with more detail coming up for 7 days.
We need a breather, that's for sure. Okay,
Yeah.
thanks so much, Ryan.
Thank you.
Well, while residents in Sydney continue to dig themselves out, they're starting to venture into stores to pick up needed supplies. Some, however, are finding it hard to get groceries and necessities. As Matthew Moore reports, the snow slowed down deliveries to the island.
Finding the items you need in Sydney can be tricky. One store was out of cheese, yogurt, and deli items, but had a good amount of fresh produce and, of course, storm chips. People shopping at Sydney River were happy to finally get out and restock their fridges.
Everybody prepares for about 3 days. This was almost 5, so we were starting to run a little low on supplies, and we had seen the pictures of the shelves from people who had come out yesterday or ventured out, and they were pretty bare, so we were hoping the trucks were able to make it in today.
The delay was caused by local roads being impassable for 3 days. Some were slowly trickling in today, but it will be a while before stocks level out.
We got in there and there was more than we expected. Some of the frozen items, the freezers, I work in the industry, so I know temperature's very good for those, not very good for those if power goes out or whatnot, but the fresh produce and the meats were all restocked. It was nice to see.
Others weren't so lucky in finding what they needed.
Well, I was looking for a shovel. There's none to be found in there anymore. No. So now we got to go somewhere else to find a shovel. So I already broke one.
Next stop after finding a shovel?
Yeah, we need wine.
Yep. The slow shipment also means some fuel shortages. Some gas stations had no diesel, while another one down the road had some, but no gasoline. The executive director of Atlantic Provinces Trucking Association says he expects to see stores back to normal early next week.
Overall, just quite chaotic, but in chatting with our members, it seems that things are slowly getting back to normal, and they're going to be working quite hard remainder of this week, over the weekend, and into next week to try and get things back on schedule for their customers and for shippers.
Fuel trucks were starting to hit the streets of Sydney this afternoon, with hopes of getting gas stations replenished as plows and trucks continue the long cleanup. Matthew Moore, CBC News, Sydney.
Premier Tim Houston has apologized for questioning whether CBRM's local state of emergency was merely a, quote, PR stunt. In a tweet last night, the Premier posted, "I made some unfortunate comments that took the conversation away from the important snow removal efforts that are happening. But when I make a mistake, I will always own it. I used a poor choice of words, and I apologize for that." He went on to say, "My intention was to make the public aware that resources were coming in regardless of a state of emergency being in effect or not." CBRM Mayor Amanda McDougall says police needed the declaration to clear the roadways for snow removal.
Nova Scotia schools are seeing a growing number of complaints from parents about sex education. Some parents are worried that LGBTQ youth are not safe in schools. Others worry that inappropriate lessons on gender and sexuality are going on in secret. Abby Ferguson with the Halifax Sexual Health Centre says the escalating debate over sex education has her worried.
So luckily we haven't seen anything too bad in Nova Scotia yet, but in the context of other provinces, such as out west in Saskatchewan, we're seeing their local Planned Parenthoods being barred from going into their schools, for example, when that was an established practice that they had done for decades.
Ferguson says concerns about sex education are best addressed by informing parents about what's being taught.
Halifax's new app for bus and ferry tickets has made traveling around the city easier for thousands of people. But it was a long road to get there. New documents show what was happening behind the scenes as delays kept coming. The CBC's Haley Ryan has more.
For many years, Halifax residents looked with envy at cities around the world with electronic fares on their transit systems. 2 summers ago, the city awarded a UK-based company, Mesabi, with a $1.6 million contract to build an app and onboard validators. What was originally supposed to take a couple of months became a year. We now know what was happening behind the scenes. Staff acknowledged that Mesabi usually took about 4 months for this kind of work, but the company had told them they could cut that down.
Realistically, I think it'll be at least a couple months, but we will push as quick as we can.
That did not happen. Instead, transit staff said in October and then again in December, they were finalizing details and work should start soon. A September 2022 launch became December, then March 2023, April, June, and then July. Another snag came in late June over a key document. Halifax project manager Millie Anthony said she was surprised to see Mesabi would take 4 months to deliver the app once work kicked off mid-July, finishing in November. After some back and forth, Mesabi agreed to shorten the schedule, and the launch date became September 1st. By mid-July, the app was renamed from Hali Go to HFX Go, and Mesabi delivered a new schedule. But it didn't change much. Anthony looped in Dave Riggi, the executive director of Halifax Transit. Riggi booked an urgent meeting with Mesabi. In an email, he said, "We cannot entertain a timeline that stretches into November. This is much longer than we had expected and than what is reasonable in my view." And then the work finally began. They cut out a soft launch, and the app was now expected October 9th. This sped up schedule led to issues. Anthony said there was a lot of technical work Halifax needed to get done by August 8th, which wasn't realistic, but that they were trying to catch up. Mesabi sent an official notice of delay on August 23rd. They said Halifax had missed the August 8th deadline to deliver branding and technical information. Mesabi said they now needed another 2 weeks and wouldn't be done until October 23rd. Riggi appeared before the city's transportation committee. He said it would likely be the fall before the app arrived, but didn't share details about the delay.
I appreciate the frustration. Frankly, I share the frustration, and we are working away at it.
Emails show the city was looking for a new project manager 2 days later. And then on November 2nd, the app arrived. About a year and 3 months since the contract was awarded. We reached out to Mesabi, but they did not get back to us. The Halifax municipality declined our request to interview transit staff, but sent responses via email. Spokesperson Bryn Budden said the app took longer than expected, but with so many residents depending on transit daily, quality is crucial. The app has since seen 41,000 downloads, and the city says feedback has been good. People now have to show bus drivers this app, but soon they can swipe them on these validators planned for mid-February. Eventually, people will be able to just tap a debit or credit card on the screens, but there's no timeline for that just yet. Haley Ryan, CBC News, Halifax.
And speaking of transit, the newest Marine Atlantic vessel is getting ready to sail to the region.
Once here, the Alasuanu will sail between North Sydney and Argentia, Newfoundland and Labrador. The vessel was built in China and will sail across the Indian Ocean, around the Cape of Good Hope on the southern tip of Africa, and then up to Newfoundland.
The name Alasunu is Mi'kmaq word for traveler. The vessel will run partly on battery power. Marine Atlantic is chartering the Alasunu for 5 years before deciding whether to buy it. The ferry is expected to arrive in Atlantic Canada in April. First quick break on the way. Stay with us.
Yes, we have a lot more to come on CBC Nova Scotia News. The ex-RCMP official guilty of leaking secrets has been sentenced to 14 years in prison.
As PC leader Pierre Poilievre drives the conversation on rising car thefts, Liberals say solutions are coming.
And there is a live look through our harbor cam. The Halifax waterfront there all lit up. Ryan is back with his weather forecast. We'll see you in a few.
All right, you can bet there are some sore backs tonight after what was a pretty nice day for shoveling, but man, it's getting heavy.
Yes, everything's melting.
Everything's
slowly, though.
Slowly melting, and then as I mentioned off the top too, tonight's kind of the first night where we really drop below the freezing mark. So that snow will freeze up, become more ice-like, and then tomorrow We thaw again tomorrow night, again quite chilly. And so that's going to continue over the next couple of days before we really kind of start to get mild and stay mild into the weekend time frame. So, yeah, but no big storms.
Yeah, there's that.
We'll take that as the win, and let's sort out the rest now. You can see high temperatures today, -1 in Sydney, 2 in Yarmouth, and 3 our hotspot provincially at Sable Island, -2 in Amherst, and -2 Pictou and into Antigonish, where of course the cleanup continues there as well. Temps have already started to slide, and it will be certainly, as I said, a cooler night tonight than it has been for the last few nights. But we will be looking at those winds continuing to become light, which is some positive news as well. Right now, sustained in the 10 to 20, 30 kilometer per hour range in Beaver Island, coastal spot there. But most of us in the 10 to 20, and the gusts really starting to taper off, gusting to 30 in Sydney and Halifax at last check. The clouds are just going to remain a bit stubborn through tonight and into tomorrow morning as well. But this area of high pressure is going to keep us quiet, which is some good news there. Again, there's the low off to the south and west of us, south and east of us rather. That storm is going to be sailing, thankfully, well to the south, and this is the system that we're going to be watching for the weekend. Some snow on the northern edge of this, but no doubt the big story is the warmer air creeping up and along with this system into the Great Lakes and then into our neck of the woods just in time for the weekend. And it will certainly be bringing some milder temperatures, though not a significant warm up. So not a huge storm system, thankfully. Tonight, temperatures -6 to -7 for most. We could see a few spots dipping below that in low-lying areas, but overall, winds are going to remain light and not a bad night tonight. As we work our way into tomorrow morning, you can see the clouds just remaining a little on the pesky side early on, but that area of high pressure takes over and we'll see a brighter sky into the afternoon. No question about it. Clouds could remain still a little bit capped here along the Northumberland shore tomorrow, but I think overall we're into a pretty fine afternoon shaping up across the province. And then, as I said, another cold night tomorrow night. Temperatures will range from around 0 to 2 on the plus side, those northeast winds. Sustained at 10, gusting upwards of 15 to 20, but overall, nice quiet day across the island for tomorrow. Good shoveling weather for sure, as good as it gets anyway. And you can see those temps in through the Sydney area again, expected to remain right near the freezing mark. Also quiet for the Northumberland Shore region for tomorrow. Again, Pictou, Antigonish, and up to Tatamagouche Bay. This area so hard hit. Anywhere between 60 and 90 centimeters, probably even more locally. And so, yeah, as we saw in the earlier report, it's going to take days more to really get even the roads clear there. So the quiet weather, well appreciated there. And in through the valley, beautiful day tomorrow. Temperatures ranging around 2 in Yarmouth tomorrow. Will be anywhere from 0 to 2 in through the south and west. And a nice quiet day in Halifax. We'll enjoy a nice midwinter's day. Friday, another beautiful day. Temperatures creeping up a little bit more, probably by a degree in most cases. We'll see those winds remaining light and that area of high pressure continuing to dominate. Now, into the long-range forecast, and again, that low is going to sail to the south, that high is going to sail to the south, and that's going to open the door and allow this next system to move in. Forecast models have been kind of a little bit later arriving with this system over the last, say, 24 hours, trending a bit brighter for Saturday. Still not convinced we'll see a whole lot of sun, but we could certainly see some breaks of sun on Saturday. Possibility of some light flurries, and with this southerly flow, I think the cloud cover overall will probably remain a bit capped, and we will see the possibility of a shower edging into the area, especially into the afternoon. Flurry chance and shower chances, though, are very isolated for Saturday. There's a better chance of showers on Sunday. Still far from a washout. Temperatures near 6 degrees. And we're going to be seeing that milder air starting to move out for the Monday into Monday night time period. That will set the stage as that system departs and the cold air moves in for another system to move into the region around Tuesday, Wednesday of next week. Still some uncertainty, Tom and Amy, but that's the one that we're going to be keeping an eye on. It's Tuesday, Wednesday of next week for the possibility, but a long way out and lots of quiet weather before then.
Yeah, we'll be ready for it. Okay.
I hope so.
Thanks so much, Ryan.
Thanks, Ryan.
Up next, I'll talk with Paul McKinnon of the Downtown Halifax Business Commission about the city setting a deadline for tenters to leave 5 encampment sites. That's our newsmaker interview.
Please stay with us. You're watching CBC Nova Scotia News.
People living in 5 tent encampment sites in Halifax are being ordered to leave in the coming weeks, with the municipality warning they could be fined or even arrested if they don't comply. Paul McKinnon is with the Downtown Halifax Business Commission. Sir, I know that organization has been involved in managing the Street Navigator program, which helps homeless people get off the streets. And this is an issue that you've been living with for some time in the city as representing the downtown business. But your reaction, first of all, to the HRM decision to order people out of those 5 tent encampments?
We support the action that HRM's taken. There's a lot of work that's going into trying to move people from the encampments, into whether it's shelters or housing or indoor spaces. And there's lots of good reasons of why that should be the case. The encampments, especially as they grow, are becoming increasingly unsafe. We hear that, through our navigator who works daily with the people in the encampments. So the encampments are just not a viable long-term solution. But the viable long-term solution is to get people into housing, and that's really what HRM is looking looking to kind of put a full court press on. I think with this announcement is kind of setting a deadline in terms of when we need to have people out of the encampments, but there are a lot of people working on solutions for people in the encampments to move them indoors.
I know you've been part of the meetings, or at least I think you've been part of the meetings leading up to this decision. As you say, it's been a topic of some discussion. I wonder, can you tell me a little bit about some of the debate surrounding this?
Sure. I mean, these are complex issues. We know that homelessness is on the top of just about everyone's mind. We see that in public surveys. We see that even in talking to our own members. I mean, they're concerned about encampments, about growing homelessness just from a humanitarian standpoint. They're concerned about the impact it's having on their businesses. They're concerned about the impact that it's having on the perception of downtown being safe. But again, I say we have that a bit of a unique perspective where we have someone, our navigator, who's working with these people every day. There's complex reasons why people are homeless. Some people are in the encampments, and there is no one-size-fits-all approach. But I think the one thing that's common, across all the people in the encampments is that it simply isn't safe for people to remain in encampments. Throughout the winter, we've seen numbers of incidents happen. We've had at least one death in our encampment here in Grand Parade. We've had a couple of fires, and security is increasingly becoming an issue. And we're hearing that from our navigator. We're hearing that from the residents there. We're hearing that from the volunteers, in Grand Parade. So the situation is untenable, and so we need to do better, and we need to get people inside.
And yet, I've heard the argument that there are spaces in shelters now. Are there enough spaces in shelters? Are they the right kinds of spaces?
Well, this is certainly what we're hearing and what was part of HRM's announcement today. And it's not just shelters. There's all sorts of different housing options, and it's not a static situation. So sometimes people are in shelters, but then they're getting moved into more permanent housing. The province has done really, an amazing job in terms of investments recently. More needs to be done in terms of social housing and shelters. And so it's true that the form shelter isn't going to work for everybody, but it is going to work for lots of people. And so let's get as many people as we can into there that are willing to go. But if not, there's other options. And so we have to work with other groups. It's our navigators. It's the volunteers in Grand Parade. There's lots of social service agencies that are focused on this issue, but perhaps maybe not coordinating quite as well as they should. And so that's I think something else we want to work on with HRM and with the social service providers is let's get everyone together and figure these places.
Well, I take your point. I mean, a lot of people are focused on this, and yet the problem persists. I'm wondering, what happens if people don't want to leave, and how worried are you that you could end up with a repeat of the kind of violence and the protests that happened back in 2021 when the police tried to remove people from the old library property?
Yeah, it certainly is a concern, and I think obviously if you've been on social media, people are kind of rallying around that cause again. And but I think what a lot of people, the situation in front of Grafton Park a number of years ago, it just was really poorly handled by lots of folks, and no one wants to see a repeat of that. And so again, I think really the focus right now is to say, listen, between now and February 26th, let's everyone put their best efforts forward in terms of trying to find suitable housing for all the people in all the encampments. Let's see how far we get with that, and then what happens on the 26th, I'm not sure. I know from the mayor's comments today, they're not necessarily looking to send police in to evict people, but what they are saying is that people aren't going to be able to set up what their belongings and tents and that type of thing in Grand Parade and some of these other parks. Although some of the parks are still going to be open as well. So I think that remains to be seen. That's not a long ways away, but I think what the deadline does is it really helps people kind of focus their efforts on this is a problem that we can't just keep putting off. We need to solve it now.
How will people, if they don't want to leave, how will you get them moved on without involving the police?
Well, I think that's a great question. That's a question that city staff has been tackling with council, and I guess with the police department as well. I don't know the answer to that. That's not something that the business community is going to be involved with in terms of making that decision. That's ultimately going to be left up to council and the police in terms of what they feel they need to do. But the city has said, we're not going to have any further tents, in certain encampments after the 26th, and in fact they do enforce that now. In other parks, you can't camp in graveyards, you can't camp in some parks that are adjacent to schools. So that enforcement actually does happen now. We just don't see it. And certainly what no one wants to see is a large scale, eviction like we saw before. So hopefully we won't get to that point.
No, but aren't many of those living in the tents now going to be back sleeping in the foyers and the doorways of your downtown businesses if they're not allowed to tent in places like Grand Parade?
Well, the end goal is to get everyone indoors, right? So off the streets and not needing to do that. So, if there's not enough housing that's available now, then we need to find ways to provide more of that, and that's what we continue to advocate, to the province, to the city in terms of the services that they provide, and to the federal government as well, who's now back into the housing game in a big way. So I think the political will, is in a whole different place than it was even a couple of months ago at all three levels, and they're seeing it. They're hearing from the residents, they're seeing it in polling, and so there's a great impetus for them to really start figuring out how to solve this problem. And again, in terms of numbers, I mean, again, these are numbers are far larger than we'd want to see, but there's less than 200 people that are sleeping outside. This still seems like it's a manageable number in a city that's that's as large and dare I say wealthy as Halifax and Nova Scotia. This should be a solvable problem at this scale.
Paul McKinnon, we have to leave it there. Thank you for this.
Great, thank you very much.
Coming up, more than 20 people are dead after bombings at political offices in Pakistan just a day before parliamentary elections.
Welcome back. A former senior RCMP intelligence official has been sentenced to 14 years in prison for leaking secrets.
In an historic trial, Cameron Ortis was found guilty of violating the Security of Information Act. The CBC's Catherine Tunney has the latest.
This was one of the last times Cameron Ortis walked freely. It'll be years until he can do that again. A different look today for the former RCMP intelligence official. Chains around his feet, sitting behind glass, as the judge sentenced him to 14 years in prison.
I just spoke to him. Obviously it's a bit of a shock.
Ortis was previously found guilty of violating Canada's Secrets Act after he leaked intelligence to police targets, men with ties to the criminal underworld. Justice Robert Moranger wrote in his decision that Ortis potentially put lives at risk and undermined Canada's reputation in the intelligence community internationally. Both the Crown and defense left the courtroom disappointed today.
Obviously, we thought this conduct was deserving of a much higher sentence.
The Crown had asked for a severe penalty, north of 20 years. With today's sentence, minus time served, Ortis will be behind bars for 7 more years.
When someone chooses to engage in conduct like Mr. Ortis, to violate their oath of protecting information that is sensitive and classified, information that Canada needs to stay secure, then that case will be thoroughly investigated, it will be vigorously prosecuted, and the offender will be held to account if convicted.
The defense argued Ortis suffered enough waiting for his case to go to trial and asked for no more time.
He stands by his innocence. The fact that the jury couldn't hear a lot of his defense obviously still bothers him, especially in fact of being convicted.
The former head of Canada's spy agency says all our allies have had embarrassing leaks. It's what you do after that matters.
This happens. All of our allies understand that. Nobody likes it, and it is unfortunate when it happens. And it really makes it clear that if you haven't got all of the tools in place to prevent leaks, that you should think about what you have to do, and probably that's the case for the RCMP.
This case is far from over. The defense plans to appeal the conviction. The Crown is also appealing, looking for a harsher sentence. Catherine Tunney, CBC News, Ottawa.
The federal government announced new money today to fight auto theft, $28 million to beef up border inspection. It comes ahead of a summit on the problem tomorrow with senior ministers, police chiefs, and city mayors meeting. The CBC's Kate McKenna reports.
It's been a couple of months, but Chris Coyer still has trouble believing his vehicle was stolen from his driveway.
They say you go through stages of grief, and I think I went through them all with the car. I was shocked, and then I was mad, and then I was, sad and in tears. I went through it all.
He's one of tens of thousands of Canadians who've lost their vehicles recently. Car thefts like this one in broad daylight are happening in record numbers, a situation some industry insiders call a national crisis.
We've been hearing that another record is going to be broken in 2023. So 2022 was the first year on record that insurance losses were over $1 billion. 2023 is on track to break that even still.
But Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre says the federal government has been asleep at the wheel. He says he's got a plan which includes increasing mandatory jail time for thieves and buying scanners to check if stolen vehicles are inside shipping crates.
Our common sense plan to put the brakes on car theft is to secure our ports and lock up the car thieves.
A new announcement from Ottawa today suggests the Liberals may have been listening.
Today, I'm pleased to announce an additional investment of $28 million to bolster the Canada Border Services Agency's ability to detect and search containers with stolen vehicles.
I would like to see things stepped up somewhat, something put in place to help a little more with the recovery.
Chris Coyer says he wants federal leaders to take this issue as seriously as he has, bumping up his own protection so his new car doesn't suffer the same fate. Kate McKenna, CBC News, Ottawa.
Israel has rejected a 4.5-month ceasefire offer by Hamas. The proposal outlines stages for all the Israeli hostages to be released and compromised on Hamas's previous demands for a permanent ceasefire before any truce.
אם החמאס ישרוד בעזה,
But Benjamin Netanyahu responded, saying the war would not end until Hamas was destroyed and that total victory was within reach. Hamas's plan stipulated ongoing talks aimed at making the ceasefire permanent, with the last hostages to be released then. It all comes amid concerns that an Israeli ground assault is imminent on Rafah, where half of Gaza's population is now crammed at the Egyptian border.
2 bombings have hit Pakistan ahead of tomorrow's national election. 26 people are dead. Dozens more are wounded. The CBC's Salima Shivji reports on the fear of more violence amid Pakistan's political turmoil.
The eve of an election turned bloody and chaotic. A rush to help victims outside bombed election offices in Pakistan's rest of Balochistan province in the southwest. 2 deadly blasts an hour apart, killing many of the victims instantly. It comes despite a show of force, tens of thousands of army personnel protecting polling stations for an election marred by claims of meddling by Pakistan's powerful military. The campaign has been unusually subdued. For many at this market, just thinking about Thursday's vote is disheartening. This 60-year-old running her sock stand can't bear it. The elections are a farce, she says. They're not fair at all. It's not an election, it's a selection, this shopkeeper says. One party is being punished, the other favored. Punished and jailed on charges he claims are political. Former Prime Minister Imran Khan is barred from running. He released this video recorded before he was arrested, calling on his supporters to still go vote. But his party, Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, has been targeted in a crackdown that human rights groups and independent observers call disturbing. It's pushed Khan's many supporters to rally differently, quietly, in backyards under the radar, fueling frustration.
There is a hindrance on behalf of the police, on behalf of the administration, because the police is harassing our supporters, and sometimes they are stopping their businesses.
Not so for the other main party. Crowds rush in to hear Nawaz Sharif speak, also a former prime minister 3 times over. Widely seen as the army's preferred candidate and the likely winner. But even here at this boisterous rally, there's a sense of futility. I have no faith in this country, this young woman says. We need new politicians, not familiar faces. Salima Shivji, CBC News, Islamabad.
An interprovincial trade spat is pouring across the border between British Columbia and Alberta. The wine war centers on old trade rules, and it's leaving wine producers with a bad taste in their mouths. The CBC's Brady Strachan has more.
So rosé has been a feature at Costco in Alberta.
It's taken decades for Quails Gate Winery to establish its brand with Albertan wine lovers. But now the West Kelowna winery has been abruptly cut off. Notice given in this letter that Alberta will no longer accept shipments of their wine.
We're being strong-armed into this position by using one lever to get another one.
A blow for the winery, which ships $100,000 worth of wholesale wine each month to Alberta. Quails Gate is just one of the BC wineries affected. They all ship directly to their wine club members, something Alberta says is not allowed. Alberta's alcohol regulator declined an interview, directing CBC News to a statement that said direct-to-consumer shipping was impacting the dollars that support projects and services Albertans rely on. This industry consultant says the issue boils down to antiquated regulations.
So it seems kind of crazy in Canada that it's easier to import wine to Alberta from France or California than it is from British Columbia or Ontario.
This sudden move by Alberta has left the wine industry scrambling, and the BC government is working to stop the blockade.
Really hard to understand why Alberta would choose this moment to go after BC wineries. I know my colleague, Minister Mike Farnworth, has reached out to his counterpart in Alberta to discuss this.
It's not the first time Alberta has cut off the flow of BC wine. In 2018, the province stopped imports over a pipeline expansion dispute with BC. The BC wine industry says disputes like this hurt their business and consumers.
Alberta is clearly the second biggest market for BC wineries. A lot of them are long-standing consumers and customers, wine club members.
Merlot, Syrah.
Alberta's regulator told winemakers it would lift the ban if they agreed to stop shipping directly to Alberta consumers, something this winery is considering. Brady Strachan, CBC News, Kelowna.
Canada's main stock index just barely stayed in the green today, while U.S. stock markets rose. Here's a look at the numbers.
For news you can trust, we have the latest on what's happening in your community and a weather forecast you can rely on no matter where you are in Atlantic Canada. I'm Amy Smith.
And I'm Ryan Snoddon.
Join us for Atlantic Tonight.
Right after the National.
All right, a few days into the cleanup after the big storm, and you can bet that lots of people are looking to get out and get going again.
I know, but so much snow, like more than we had over the holidays. February snow is way bigger than December.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. And listen, I guess we were kind of due, right?
Yeah.
And digging into some of the numbers now, because I hope to kind of compare this to some previous storms. And every once in a while, we get a big wallop like this, although this is right near the top of the list. No question about it. Let's have a look at our viewer picture of the day, and a beautiful one here, though very snowy, from New Glasgow. And this picture... yeah.
Talk about getting out for a stroll.
All they're missing is Santa, right?
Yeah, so starting from right to left, there's Dasher and
Yeah,
Dancer
that's
and
right.
Prancer and Vixen and Comet and Cupid and Donner and Blitzen. So
No
they're all
Rudolph,
there.
though.
No Rudolph, no. He's still trying to find his way, I guess, through the raging snow. Now, as we look at the forecast for tomorrow, again, looking at a beautiful day, temperatures ranging between 0 and 2 on the plus side, those northeast winds, 10 to 20 kilometers per hour. Really, really, really nice. Now, we're going to be seeing another fine day for Friday. Temps notably cooler, again, in the cooler than it will be in the southwest. The northeast will be, rather, with temperatures ranging around the freezing mark there, but up into the 2, even 3 degree range for the southwest on Friday. Watching that area of high pressure to continue to kind of dominate for the next couple of days, which is good. Turning a little unsettled for the weekend and keeping an eye on Tuesday, Wednesday of next week.
Curious about that.
Yeah.
All right, playing the piano, well, is challenging enough sitting down.
Well, just imagine doing it while suspended in mid-air. That's right. Pianist-composer Alain Roche and his grand piano were hoisted in the air in Munich this week.
Wow, and the Swiss musician gave an airborne performance of a piece called Winter Solstice.
He plans to perform before sunrise every day until the summer solstice. This is all part of his so-called piano vertical project.
No fear of heights, I
Looks like
guess, huh?
Spider-Man on there or something.
Yeah,
doesn't he?
for sure.
That's it for us tonight. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.
Good night.
Good night.